Okay, my name is Ron Carrico, San Diego Air and Space Museum. Today is March the 23rd, and we're at the museum right now, and we're going to be interviewing Robert Arnold, Captain, United States Navy, retired. So, you don't mind if I call you Bob, right?
No, please do.
So, Bob, when were you born?
In 1932 in Jersey City, New Jersey.
And why did you become interested in aviation?
Well, it was interesting. I first 10, 11 years of my childhood was in New Jersey, and then I went to live in Schenectady, New York, working at Lake George, New York, and staying with the Duffy family where they rented rooms, and I had been with them a couple of summers before. And their son came home from Key West. He was a Navy pilot and had broken his ankle. He was on a sick leave, and we started talking about naval aviation, and I got interested in that. And I realized that the government was going to grab me for something. This was 1952, 53, and then I was going to face the draft. I was exempt from it because I've been in ROTC in college, so I was safe as far as the summer went. But as soon as the fall came along, they were going to find out I was no longer there. And anyway, that got me interested in it, and I signed up for it.
So you started, where did you become commissioned then?
Well, I got commissioned after I went through flight training as a cadet. Okay. And part of the deal was that the requirements were you had to have equivalent of 2 years of college to fulfill that, and you had a cadet status. If you washed out or if you dropped out, you'd finish a year and a half committed military service as an enlisted man.
So you graduated from pilot training in '54.
Yeah, right.
And there was something significant about that, right?
Well, I was regular training and get ready for carrier calls. That was the last thing we did, was make 6 landings on a carrier. And
what were you flying then?
SNJs. And the SNJ, well, I take that back. We fly SNJs in basic, and I was flying the old F-6F Hellcat from World War II. So that was kind of fun to be able to, climb into a World War II airplane and fly. And we were all set to go.
What was the difference of performance between an SNJ and a Hellcat?
Oh, mostly the engine power. And the SNJ was designed as a 2-seater trainer. Right. And of course the F-6 is a single-seater.
What did it feel like the first time you soloed the single-seater? That must have been...
That was a big kick. You add power to that, and it doesn't putt down the runway. It roars off the runway.
Well, it had like 1,300 horsepower, didn't it?
I don't remember, to tell you the truth, but it was fun to fly.
How about the rudder input on takeoff with a powerful radial engine like that?
It's significant, and it plays into your, if you're really learning how to fly, you start to appreciate what a rudder can do for you. Right. And it's an instrument that you don't think of in the SNJ. It's too small. And,
oh, really?
Yeah, not much. You dial it in and for takeoff, and that's about it.
But how would this is kind of off the subject, but if you're going to do a loop, okay, so you're going to get really slow at the top, maybe 100 or so. Yeah. Are you going to be full power then, or do you start pulling the power back on the way?
Oh, no, you're full power on that. And
then it's got to be almost full rudder at that point.
Well, yes, that's true, but it happens so fast you really, the rudder impact isn't that much for the smaller airplanes like the SNJ. Right. And it's a trainer. It's designed to just do everything.
I know the Air Force call it the T6.
Yeah, but this, let me finish my story. This fellow would come along and tell us we weren't going to make it. And then as I was finishing up the normal syllabus, getting ready for the carrier broke down. And it was in Mayport, outside of Jacksonville. And they weren't finishing up any students. And what happened would, you'd finish up as a cadet, you'd get your commission and your wings at the same time, and then you'd go back to one of the fields in Texas and get jet time. Up to that point, we didn't have any, it was all prop time. So we went through a jet transition syllabus as commissioned officers. And that's, my story was, I had received my wings in my brand new ensign uniform out of one of the outlying fields, and I was at the main base ready to get my wings from the captain, chief of staff. And this fellow I was telling you about came along, and he was in his drab clothes that he had worn forever. And he looked at me and greeted me with a couple of four-letter words I won't repeat, and called me an SOB because I leaped ahead of him. And I just couldn't resist. I stood up and I said, "Cadet, you watch your mouth when you talk to a commissioned officer." And he thought he was going to die of apoplexy right there.
But it says here you were the Navy's first jet cadet.
Well, I was. As I said, they would normally commission you and give you your wings after you landed on the carrier, and then go back as an ensign and go through the program. So since we didn't get that portion of it, I went back as a cadet, and I got my wings and commission and my wings at the same time.
And so when you were actually commissioned, then what were you flying then?
The TV and the T2V, which is jet trainers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was a jet transition unit.
I forgot to, usually I try and keep things in order. I kind of forgot this. Number one, what did your parents do?
Oh, my folks, well, my dad was a civil servant working for the U.S. Army up in Schenectady. They had a big storage area there, and he'd been doing that a lot. Stepmother was a widow, been a widow, and she just was a housekeeper.
Okay, now you were about, what, 13 when the war ended?
Yeah, that's about right.
And so, do you remember hearing about the war ending and what you thought of it?
Oh, yeah, I remember it very well. I remember the announcement that the Japanese had surrendered, and then that the Germans had a few days later, so there was no more fighting.
What do you remember hearing about the atomic bomb?
That it was just a big bomb, and it was a major breakthrough as far as the explosives went, the power that it could deliver.
Okay, you graduated from pilot training, and then you went off to, where'd you go from there?
Oh, when I got my wings, I went to a squadron in Jacksonville, and I was flying the F-9F Cougar, which was F-9F 7. It's a swept wing one, made by Grumman.
And this was a
single-seater carrier airplane.
Right, but it was also pretty much a brand new airplane.
It was at the time. And all my time in the Navy, and this will probably get you all the times I got shot at. I got one hit, but the Cougar was one airplane I didn't bring back. I was getting ready to land at Jacksonville, and I was making an approach, and an engine quit. And I happened to be over the St. Johns River, fortunately, because those were the days long before I had the 00 seats. I would have had to bail out at 1,000 feet and hope the chute would open and all that. So it turned out I was over the water, and I ditched it, walked away from it, no problems.
You ditched a jet, huh?
Yeah.
Most people don't do that.
That's I've heard that all my life. Yeah.
What did anybody know you were going in when it happened? And
Just the fellow behind me in the pattern. I was in the pattern, gear and flaps down, and about the 90-degree position, ready to turn final, and the aircraft did a little wiggle. And I looked down, and the RPM was unwinding, and the altitude was getting lower, and I was passing 800 feet, and I tried a couple of emergency air starts, which they, in case there's any fuel in there at all, it'll light, and nothing happened. And I recognized that this isn't going to work, so I got ready for the ditching. And I ditched and climbed out the left side, because we got in and out of the cockpit from the left. And I heard this voice that says, "Are you okay?" And that's when I looked up, and I was 12 feet away from a boathouse. And I never saw it. All I saw was in front of me. And I said, "I'm fine," and I was feeling pretty good. And there were about 5 or 6 people there, and one of them said, he's okay. Somebody said, "Well, why don't we ask him how to get out of the water?" I'm in the water floating around. And they said, "Well, come on over and we'll pull you out." And I hadn't thought about that. I was just floating around, happy to be out of that airplane.
Was the airplane right there at the end of by the boathouse then?
It was right there by the boathouse. I was telling the fellas the other day, I was looking through some pictures, and I had a picture of the St. Johns River. It's beautiful, you know, all the boats and everything. And you look hard enough and you can see the tail of the airplane sticking out of the water. And it was in shallow water. They got it out and found out it had run out of gas. It had 1,200 pounds indicated, but it wasn't getting to the engine.
Well, I always thought there was a little left in the tank afterwards, you know?
I thought there was something to it, but there was nothing.
That's what my mom used to say, there's always a little bit left. So you were there at Jacksonville till '58, and then you became a flight instructor in an LSO.
Mhm.
And where was that?
Well, I was a landing signal officer, which is, at that time, he's the fellow that stands out there at the platform on the ships and gives the visual signals about the landing. I'd done that for the squadron, and they had a basic carrier landing school there in Pensacola, Florida. So I spent the next 3 years at Pensacola.
Now, it says you're T-28 SMB, TV, and TV. So in other words, you were qualified with certain different airplanes.
Right.
So they have different LSOs for different kinds of airplanes.
Yes, yeah.
Because you know how to fly that airplane.
Yeah.
I see you also flew the FJ3.
The FJ3 Fury, that was the Navy's version of the old F-86,
Right.
the Sabre jet. And
Right.
yeah, we had the first, the Marines had the FJ2s, and then we got the FJ3s, and that had a newer engine in it.
I've been told by several people that the F-86 was probably the finest flying airplane ever made.
It was a great machine. It was very, very maneuverable.
61 to 62 El Centro, Shooting Stars. What is Shooting Stars?
Well, I was coming up on transfer at the time, my 3 years as flight instructor, so I was looking at a set of orders. And a friend of mine was Zeb Knott, and Zeb has the unusual distinction of having been the skipper of the Blue Angels for 3 years. And he called me up and he said, how would you like to be the parachute team of the Shooting Stars liaison? And I said the same thing, what are the Shooting Stars? Well, it's a skydiving team. And there is a parachute center in California. And they were putting on shows because 1961 was the 50th anniversary of naval aviation. They flew an airplane off a ship in 1911, and here came 50 years later, they were celebrating. And the Blue Angels were doing a lot of shows, and they put into this, for its day, it was pretty interesting. They had free fall, and they'd have smoke coming out of their boots, and they'd do acrobatics and land in front of the crowd. So I took the job, and they said, if you take it for a year and do okay, we'll guarantee that you'll get a squadron. You will get a set of orders to ship's company, but you'll be put in a flying job. I said, that's good for me. So that's what I went ahead and did for the year. Got to travel a lot, see a lot of different places, and got to, as I said to a friend of mine, where in the world is El Centro? And he said, it's California. And I hadn't been to California, and I said, oh, that's great, terrific. Well, anybody that knows California and knows El Centro is right in the middle of the desert.
Yeah. You go in '62, you go to Navy Lemoore, flying A4s and F8s at the same time, or?
A4s. I was asked when, as I mentioned, I was promised a squadron, and they said to me, how would you like to fly the Demon, the F3H?
Right.
And that's the one that had such a terrible reputation.
Right.
We kept thinking they made that so they could find out what would go wrong when they made the F4. So I think is what they did. And if I had gone there, I would have eventually, I'm sure, got into an F4 squadron. They would have transitioned. But I didn't really particularly want that. And they said, well, we're building up the light attack community. And how about the A4? And I'd heard about it, and people that had flown really liked it and liked the mission.
When was the A4, when was it brought into service anyway?
I want to say late 50s, I think early 60s. It was just getting involved. It's a great airplane to fly, and I think it's there may be another one. I think it's the one that everybody remembers that doesn't. It's the one Navy airplane that doesn't fold its wings because of the.
Well, they're so small.
Yeah, so small and it fits so nicely.
But you're a pretty big guy to fit in that airplane. That's a pretty little airplane.
Yeah, they had it set up for guys like me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we could get in it okay. But you're right, everything was, you didn't have to reach very far to touch everything in the cockpit.
I've asked several other people this about the A4. Did you ever get it to go supersonic?
No, I never did.
Never try?
Oh, I tried it, and I get about 0.88 or something like that, and it'd buff it and
Really?
wouldn't go through it, no.
Yeah,
No, I know it could, if they cleaned it up. Now, the normal flight in that, they carry a 200-gallon fuel tank in the center line.
right.
And that was the real shortcoming of the idea. It was just it didn't have enough fuel.
One of our docents here is a guy named John Farron. And
I know John.
You know John? Okay,
Yeah.
good. He lives up in Oceanside.
Uh-huh.
And he said every time he tried to go supersonic going straight down, the thing would start tucking under really badly.
Yeah,
It'd
yeah.
start pitching
yeah.
down like that. He just couldn't go through the barrier. So,
No, we carried, which I'm sure we'll get to, in Vietnam we carried normal load with 6 500-pound bombs because the center line was always a big tank.
mhm.
And I took one, which I'll get to, Alpha Strike up there where I talked everybody into taking the tanks off and getting a full load of gas so we could carry 10 bombs instead of the 6. And that worked, except it took forever. We had to refuel in the air. We had to,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
we had to find more airborne tankers to give us the gasoline. And then, but it was nice that when we did get there, we had 10 bombs to drop instead of 6 of them.
What? Okay, I'm just going to go forward here. So you got the A4 compared to the F9.
A little hard to make the comparison because I think the F9 was designed to be a faster plane than the A4.
Mm.
And consequently it wasn't as maneuverable. The thing about the A4 is I found it at any time you could put 6 Gs on it and it'd get you out of where you were.
Mm-hmm.
It was great for that.
Was there ever a situation where an A4 had air combat with a MiG? I don't remember that.
Yeah, we have a fellow in our air wing. Who?
Was it Cunningham?
Wasn't Cunningham. It wasn't our air wing, our squadron, but he got a Silver Star for shooting the MiG down. It got in front of him, and he had the A4. Pam and I were talking about it just a little while ago. The A4, if I remember correctly, had 2 cannons, 20 millimeter cannon, and had 100 rounds in each gun, which is nothing.
Right.
And we never used it to shoot at anything. Half the time the guns wouldn't work, and the other time there wasn't enough ammo to do any damage. But he got himself a MiG. I started over there. I was a senior lieutenant commander, and I hadn't been in any combat. And I got down and I started flying these missions down south. It's supposedly to stop the flow of men and materials in the evenings, which was useless because they drive into the bushes and we could never see them. But we didn't know what we were going to do. I think I went for 3 of those missions, and then we started the Alpha Strikes. And those were the ones where we went after specific targets with the World War II type, strike force and so forth. And
World War II type meaning?
the big bombers would come in, let's hit them where they make stuff instead of waiting for them to put it on the road.
Well, let's talk about the F8. So now you want to go from A4 to F8. That's got to be a big transition.
It was, and they gave us as LSOs carte blanche to get checked out in all the airplanes in the air wing. So that's why I got to fly the F8. I only got 1 or 2 hops in it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I didn't really fly that much of that, and I flew the F4 under the same rules.
Just enough to get checked out.
Just enough to get checked out and really feel what happens when you kick in that afterburner. It's a real kick in the pants. Great machines.
Well, those are only the two airplanes you flew that had AB in it, I guess. Afterburner.
Yeah, they were. They were the only ones.
It's not enough time in either one to get any kind of comparison between the two.
Not really.
How did you get, when you flew the F4, of course you had a backseater in it. Was it one with the stick in the back, or?
He was just an observer.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
they just turned you loose and said go fly the airplane?
Yeah, it let me,
Really? Wow.
So that was good. I got to fly the fun airplane was the SPAD, the old A1.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was the ultimate, I would guess, in prop airplanes from World War II era. They moving into the jet.
Did you fly the A1E or the H, or which one?
I tell you, I flew it, but I can't remember.
Single seat or?
Single seat.
Yeah.
Single seat. And yeah, it was a noisy machine, of course.
Yeah.
But
it took you a long time before you actually got into the war.
yes, it did. One of the interesting things, I think, is that when I got assigned to squadron, combat squadron, the skipper, the XO, myself as the ops officer, and the maintenance officer, all the top four pilots had no combat experience. And it was uncomfortable to be having the youngsters teach you about combat when you.
Well, so now you've been flying the A4 for at least 4 years by then.
Yeah, but no combat. I
But-
did one tour on the West Coast in VA 112, which was peacetime.
But you were familiar with doing
Oh, yeah.
bomb and strafe and all that.
Oh yeah, I was familiar with the airplane. I felt comfortable on it.
But so how was it different for being the old timer with the new guys with the experience?
Well, it was just you hadn't done it yet. You hadn't exchanged firepower with anybody. And the biggest shock, and everybody I've ever talked to that experienced the same thing comes away with it, was the concentration of anti-aircraft. We'd come over an area and it would be, as far as you could see, you'd see gun flashes going off. Literally hundreds of guns. In fact, go ahead.
So when you come into the squadron, so what do? You fly lead? Or you don't fly lead, you fly wing.
I
guess.
fly wing with an experienced guy for a couple hops and find out what he does, and then I'd take over. Being a senior, I'd take over. I had a division that I trained with the four of us pretty much, and we'd get scheduled that way. So pretty soon we knew each other, the idiosyncrasies of everybody's flying.
And you were flying on the Oriskany at that point.
Oriskany, right?
And you flew a lot of missions.
A lot.
125.
Well, I wound up with over 300 missions. Had 2 more tours over there.
What? When they flew these missions, most of the time they were in the south, apparently, right?
To begin with, yes.
Okay.
And we were there in less than a week when we started going north.
Okay, and in the south, were you working with forward air controller?
Worked with the FAC, usually the 2 planes sections, and we worked with Hillsborough, which was the Airborne Command Control Center, and they were the ones who plugged in these, planes that we had, and they'd send us over to contact the FAC, and of course, as you know, the FAC is small, light airplane, and the pilot is very familiar with that piece of territory, and he looks to see if there's tire tracks or something in the jungle that wasn't there yesterday that might be a truck park. And he'd call us in and he'd give us the coordinates and so forth and give us the run and headings. And we'd go in, we had, say, 6 bombs, and we'd make 3 runs. And they never fire back at us because they didn't want them to know where they were. Except they got smart. And I got to tell you this because I think you get a kick out of it. We had 2 Larrys in the squadron. Larry Cunningham was a brand new kid right out of flight training, and the other Larry was the acting land signal officer, so he had 1 tour under his belt. And Larry Cunningham, the youngster, was going out with Denny Weekman, and Denny, probably the most experienced pilot I've ever run across. He flew with Air America and all that before he got into this stuff. And they were going on one of these milk runs, you know, to drop and blow up some trees. And Larry Duthie leans, and he's in the ready room, and he leans over while these guys are briefing. He says, "Where are you fellas going?" And they said, "Well, rinky dink poo, you know, who know where." And Larry says, "That's a hot area. You better be really careful, just to jack this guy up, you know." So lo and behold, it's the last hop of the day, and the Vietnamese weren't stupid, and they knew when the last hop was, and they knew that nobody else was coming in, so they would hold their fire till that last hop, and then they'd unload everything they had. And they got Larry Cunningham, and he got all shot up. He got back to the ship. He was making his approach. He got to the 90-degree position, and a plane caught on fire. And everybody says, "Get out of that." So he ejects. They pick him up in the helo. They drop him dripping wet on the flight deck. Cunningham is on the LSO platform, and he shouts at him. He says, "I told you that was a hot area." That was his welcome to combat. Yeah. And he had the distinction of having to jump out of another one during the cruise. He got back both times, but we're happy to say. But he had 2 planes he left over there.
I was surprised how many prisoners there were. 670, I think.
Is that right?
POWs, yeah. There's a lot. The Ev Southwick, who came and spoke to our, we have a volunteer group that meets every 3rd Monday or so.
Uh-huh.
And so I think this would be something you should do, come in and talk about.
Oh, I'd like to, yeah. I went to the Naval Postgraduate School for a couple of years, part of that NAVCAT program, and I had a buddy, and he and I rented a couple of rooms there in Monterey. I went to Naval Postgraduate School for a couple of years. And Dan, a neat guy, and he had some combat time from Korea. He was a year or 2 senior to me. And we went to school together. And then I heard from his girlfriend that he was shot down and probably killed in action because he saw him going into a cloud in a big burst of fire and nothing. And about a year and a half later, she called me that he was confirmed as a POW. And Dan, Berlin Danielson, he's just a neat guy. And he gets back, and I find out from her that he's staying up in the LA hospital compound, do physicals on him. And I hadn't spoken to him in 5 or 6 years. So I finally got on the phone, and he told me how to get there. And I went to the back room, the big Marine standing there, and told him I was, visiting Commander Daniels. And Dan walks out, and the first thing he says to me, he says, hello, ugly. And my first comment was, hello, you son of a bitch. And that's how we greeted each other after all those years. But they got married and got a kid, and everything seems to be going along fine. So we'll get out of there pretty good shape.
So 64, and then, let's see, we were up to 68 on the Oriskany, and you were there for, you were there for a long time, actually.
Yeah.
And then, so when you started flying up north, what kind of missions were they up north?
They were alpha strikes, we called them. They were called alpha strikes because, from what I understand, the document that was printed up for the next day's operations listed the targets that were of the most importance and were going to get the most attention, and they were under the alpha list. So that's how they got their name, the Alpha Strike.
How was the attack?
Well, we'd have about the basic strike force was probably 20 airplanes, 16 to 20.
Off the same ship?
Off the same ship. And the other ships are doing it, but they're following us.
Right.
Not at the same time. And then out of that, we'd also have a couple of flak suppressors and a couple of Iron Hand. I don't know if you've gotten into Iron. Have you talked to anybody about Iron Hand?
I think I know what that means, but go ahead.
Well, anyway, we were, as I mentioned earlier, we had 2 A4 squadrons in the air wing, and we did the same thing, except they came out with the Iron Hand, and the Iron Hand was the anti-missile. And we had missiles that would home in on their the acquisition and their tracking radars for their missiles. In fact, that was going to bring up is we had no idea what we were going to meet up there. The expectation for a lot of people was there's going to be a lot of MiGs up there. I saw 3 MiGs in 2 years, and they were running from us, so we weren't trying to engage us. And
So the Iron Hand, what that was?
that was the term used for the anti-missile.
Yeah, that was the Wild Weasel. That's what the Air Force called it.
That's what they did.
So the Wild Weasel airplanes were supplying the suppression for you? Or
Well, we had our own, but not enough for both squadrons. So we, 164, got the tasking for doing the Iron Hand mission. And 163 got, I forget what they called it, but there was a...
Well, what did they use for airplanes? Did they use F-4?
A4s.
Because the other ones, they use two-seaters, F-105s and two-seater F-4s.
Well, they would use the A4s to deliver the ordnance, and they'd use an F-8 as an escort. There's another pair of eyes for that. And normally on a strike group, you've got your major group, and then you have flak suppressors on either side. And if you see a flak site, you go after it. If you don't see one, it's a target of opportunity. But it was, in and out as fast as you can.
What was the attack speed usually used?
We went in about, anywhere from 12 to 15,000 feet, and roll in at the bomb sites were set for 10,000 foot roll in, and we get up about 510, 550 in our run. And of course, we drop all 6, and if it was a...
So you're doing it from dive bomb?
Dive bomb,
Like 45 degree or 60 degree?
Yeah, 45 degrees, sometimes steeper than that. Sometimes when the Air Wing commander would miss the target, we'd say, hey, you just missed it, CAG. You gotta come back. And it would be a 60-degree dive.
So did you do it any at night?
Yeah, night we tried to intercept the traffic at night. I never participated in an alpha strike at night. It was, as I started to say earlier, my first alpha strike, I was Iron Hand, daytime. The next one was a night hop. And I was flying the 2nd Division in the Major Strike Force, and the skipper was flying the lead. And we came over a rise into a valley where the target was. And I'll never forget that. I rode over the rise. It was like I was coming over Los Angeles at night. All I could see were gun flashes. I mean, hundreds of them. And as I tell people this day, I never saw the target. I got on the skipper's wing, and when he dropped, I dropped. I played Blue Angel with him, and down we went, and off we went. And we all talked about that. Couldn't believe the concentration of the fire.
Where was it?
It was around Vin. It was one of those outlying areas around Vin. Did a lot around Vin, and what was the big base that they had, air base? We bombed that a lot, bridges and roads and so forth.
Have you been back to Vietnam?
I made 3 trips over there, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, the last one was, much of it, I brought a plane over for a squadron. I was on Air Pac staff after the normal rotation, and I was drafted as part of a safety team, go out and see what people are doing things properly. And I was still current in the airplane. So my boss said to me, how about going back out there? And I said, fine. I said, if I go, I'm taking my hard hat. So I went and I got a couple more missions with one outfit. I have to laugh to this day. The rules say if you participated in any flight operations during the period that is being considered, and that ship gets a unit decoration, like a presidential unit citation, he says, you're qualified to wear that. And I went back and flew one mission off the Midway. And they got the presidential unit citation. So they presented that to me, one hop, and that was it.
What was the airplane?
A4s. A4s.
I see it also say you flew one mission in an F-4 and one mission in a C-130. What was the C-130 mission?
They, the Air Force had a program, C-130, and they go up this road and they could pick up targets miles away on either side, and they would fire from that road position. And they would have I think they had an A7 units, and they were running short of them. And they asked the admiral if they could borrow, the general, if the Navy could lend them some planes, particularly at night. And we said, sure, we did. So I flew one hop with them to see what they did. And then I flew one hop with an F-4, which was, escorting, and we'd go in after them. And that amazed me. I couldn't get over that. You're over this area that there's nothing there. It's black as can be, and all is going on. And all of a sudden, the C-130 starts banging away. And out there, maybe 5 miles away, a fire starts. They hit something. And
This is the gunship you're talking about.
They got a target.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they said we go over in there with something.
Well, they could see at night.
Yeah,
They could
see at
what was
night
going
and
on.
do all that stuff. So I had 2 hops, one with the Air Force. I said we can do it, but we're not doing anything spectacular here.
I wonder if they're using gunships over in Iraq right now.
I wouldn't be surprised.
We sure don't read much about what they're
Yeah.
actually doing.
Unfortunately, we had a night mission, and 2 of our fellows were coming back, and they flew over an area that had no indication that there was anything there, and it happened to be a secret headquarters, and they were defending it. And they opened fire, and they got both airplanes. And we got one of them back. That was Larry Duthie, and the other one was down on the ground. And the next night, we launched, we got the one guy back. He evaded. They still had one fellow on the ground, and we went in to see if we could get him. And he was on a hill. There was a valley and a bigger hill, and there was a camp up there. And we were trying to pick him up with a helo. And I had an ordnance, one of the ordnance things, it must have been from World War I, it was a 19-shot rocket pod that would ripple off all these rockets.
Now, the Air Force uses those all the time.
Yeah, and I had one of those, and I hadn't fired one in God knows how long. And I was rolling in, and lo and behold, I had half a dozen trucks that had come out of the camp and were down at the base of the hill shooting at something. And they saw me, and I rolled in, and they started at me, and I fired the 19-shot pod, and I forgot how much noise it makes. It scared the hell out of me. It roars off. 19 of them ripping off there.
When was that? Remember the date about?
Not really. It was early in the cruise. I could find out and let you know.
That's not.
But they turned around, the rest of the trucks, and went back. And then the helo came in, and the helo guy says, I can't see, I'm taking it around. And we kept saying, don't go in the valley. And he went in the valley, and he got shot down, and killed everybody aboard. And our guy got captured, and I still don't know to this day. We got different stories that he was killed the same day or a couple of days later, but he didn't survive.
Well, I think some of the people on the ground were probably pretty grumpy about being bombed and shot at.
They were probably bad.
Yeah.
There was a hot pan, we were talking about it last night, and they didn't get around to it. I led an alpha strike, and I think I started to mention one where we took all the tanks off, the external tanks.
Right.
So there I am with a whole, squadron full of carrying 10 bombs. And I remember it was a railroad area, and there were trains all there, and I rolled in. And the thing about the dive bombing is you don't see your bombs go off. By the time you pull up and getting out of there, they're already hit their target. And I ran into the situation where the target was beautiful, and I dropped and I could count. It seemed like it took forever, like 10 bombs. So they're supposed to ripple off. You know, 1, 2, 3. When the hell are they going to get up? And I'm down, and finally the last one goes off, and I started pulling up, and where I was going to be normally as in my pull-up, 6 or 8 flak sights had narrowed in on one spot, and they were going to hose me down. Now, they couldn't stop me from dropping, but they're going to get me on the way out. And I saw that, and I did a hard 9-degree turn, and I looked over my shoulder, and since I had 10 bombs, I watched the last 3 of them go off, and they were all on target. So now I got to get the hell out of there. And of course, I've got no external stores on me now, so that airplane really flew well. The A4 it didn't have that big tank hanging on it. So I pulled back around to the original heading that I had when I dropped my bombs, and I saw all this stuff, and I went down on the deck, and I think I was blowing down grass when I went by them. And I know it's my imagination, but I swore I could see them cranking the elevation down on those guns. They were waiting for me, and I went under them and on the way out. And at that time, it was early in the cruise, and we didn't know how good the missile system was. But I was receiving the radar tracking and all the way out, and I was in the grass. I was S-turning all the way out. And I got out to when I looked down, I was low on gas, and I figured I was supposed to pick up a tanker at the shoreline from one of the other carriers. Well, we got there, and there were no tankers. And one of our planes from the squadron ran out of gas, and he had to jump out. They got him back, but we lost an airplane on that one. And that was the one where I looked at my fuel tank, and the Oriskany was 161 miles away. And I looked at it, I am not going to make it. I had 1,500 pounds or something. I'd be under 1,000 pounds by the time I got there. And so there was another carrier I dialed, I called up, and I said, "Have you guys got a ready deck?" And told them my problem. And they said, "We're launching the tanker." And all things considered, I wasn't too thrilled about that, since they were supposed to have been there, when we got there. Sure enough, he comes up, and we're headed, opposite directions. And I said, "Call me when you're 30 miles out." And he called me, and I said, "Pick up a heading 160 or something to the ship." And he turned, and I turned and plugged him. He transferred 2,000 pounds of fuel. I was indicating 200 pounds when I plugged him. It filled up to 2,000. So we were right on as far as our instruments went. I said, "Thanks very much." And he went home, and I went back to the ship. And the skipper was having fits. He lost 2 airplanes the day before. He just lost another airplane with the fellow that jumped out. And I'm off the air. I'm on another frequency. So he thinks I'm down. He thinks he's lost 4 planes. And we tried to keep 12 up airplanes on the ship. I think sometimes we had as many as 16 assigned, but usually we had 14, and there were a couple in Cuby Point getting an engine change or something. So, but we could keep active duty 12 birds that we could count on for flying.
What happened to your wingman in that?
Oh, we got separated in go-arounds, and he got back okay.
So you're down on the deck,
dodging it.
But he rolled in and back of you. So if they were aiming at you, he must have had a clear path in. Then.
Yeah, I guess he did. You come to think of it.
But you didn't talk to him when you pulled off the target after that?
No, we were busy. Didn't discuss it too often. We get back we'd always get a debrief from our air intelligence guy. What did you do? What did you find out? And we'd share what we experienced.
What was the approach speed when you come into the carrier on an A4?
250. Starboard side, if it's VFR,
Just tell me about the landing pattern.
Yeah, landing pattern. You come in on the starboard side of the ship. It's underway, and 250 knots, and you pick your spot and get in the pattern. And if it's crowded, you go around again.
So you fly. Okay, so you're what, 2,000 to 3,000 feet, and then just to get into the pattern.
Yeah, you're about 1,000 feet.
Okay, find place, fly downwind at 150 or so.
150, 135, 50,
Okay.
depending.
Turning base at about 120 or so.
And turning base, usually hit the 180, opposite direction, about 130, 135 maybe. And by the time you roll in, you should be about between 125 and 130.
So at this point, when you're flying final though, is this the point, did they have the ball at that point, or is that?
Oh, they had the ball, yeah.
Okay.
They did that.
Being an Air Force guy, I never really understand the whole ball thing.
Oh, it's just a glide path. And I was an LSO, using the ball in the cruise before, and I told the guys, I said, if you start the way this goes, if you start and the deck is pitching, and you start on there, don't give it up, because it'll usually smooth out as you. We're not going to put you in a bad bind, but don't give up, because it'll smooth out, and we'll keep you coming as long as we have a smooth deck for you to land on.
Well, so the ball is pretty stabilized. So if you fly the ball, it's going to take you down to a point, no matter what the pitch is doing.
That's right. Stabilized and this
So when the ball must go out of, must go out of your sight.
it goes out of sight, and if you're on glide path, you should catch the number 3 wire, the 4 wires,
Right.
and you should catch the 3 wire. It's designed for that, and it's altered depending upon the airplane. What the glide path will be.
Right. So,
Yeah,
but it's usually 2 degrees, 2.5 degrees, something like that.
Yeah, I don't really remember quite what it was.
So when the thing so when the ball disappears from your left side, from your sight, is that where you chop the power then? Or?
Well, you can leave your power on in case you miss.
Well, the power stays on. Oh, that's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
And then you go full power.
Then you go
right?
full power and you go. Yeah.
That must be weird.
Well, it isn't. You get used to it because you practice it enough. But the problems as an LSO that I had is that the guys started spotting the deck. I'm here, and they quit looking at the ball, and they drop their nose, and they land short of the wires, and they taxi into them. Now, what we have the green.
All right, back up again.
Okay.
All right, so they quit looking at. They start looking at the deck where they want to land
Instead of the ball.
instead of the ball.
Yeah.
Now, how far out are you when the ball actually disappears?
Oh, you're probably 50 yards out.
50 yards from the end of the deck.
Yeah. And we put up everybody's landing is we call it the greenie board, is on a big board, and you can see patterns. And I was I had one youngster, good kid, but he started dropping his nose, and he says, "Oh, fair pass, DNAR, drop nose and ramp. You're not flying the ball all the way down like you're supposed to. You're spotting the deck. Now, you may get away with it in the daytime, but at night it could be critical." I was on the LSO helping a guy out when an A3 was doing just that, and it hit the ramp and took his leg off and almost got all of us. But it's pretty serious. That drop the nose at the ramp is a very bad habit to get into for carrier pilots.
Okay, so what you're talking about is that he takes his eyes off
Right.
of the ball. He starts looking at the ramp, and then it has a tendency to lower your nose
Yeah.
for some reason. Then you land short. He pulls off the landing gear, crashes, and that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And an A3 must have been a horrible airplane to get
It
off
was.
the deck.
It was. It's they weren't. I don't know their training schedule, but they didn't do an awful lot of CQ stuff, and always had problems with the A3 pilots.
It was such a big airplane.
It was a big airplane. It was a great machine of carrying equipment back and forth. But
Well, they mostly used it for reconnaissance, didn't they?
yeah, most of the time.
And probably just really high-speed reconnaissance, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
They didn't have any trick stuff like terrain following radar or that kind of business.
No, I guess it was the A6 one that got fancy.
Sure.
Out of what's the field up there at Whidbey Island, the air station up there is where the A6s are.
Well, let's say move ahead. So now at 68, you come back to the States, you go to Washington.
Yeah,
CNO operations briefer.
yeah, that was my last tour. I was on the airpack staff as the light attack weenie, for A4s and A7s, all A7s at
What
that
kind of
time.
stuff did you brief anyway?
Pardon me, what did I
Oh,
bring?
yeah, what were you, when you briefed CNO who was the CNO at that time?
That, I can't remember his name. I can see his face, but I don't remember his name. But I had been a briefer for a year in the past, and they came and got me again. And my skipper, Doug Mao, went to the Navy and said, hey, Bob's been my ops officer, and he's handled all this. One of the things we did, we had no training, none, about how to avoid the missile system. There's always some kind of a tactic that you should try to employ. And I used to get the Iron Hand people together after each hop, and we talk it over, and we decide what we're going to do the next hop, because we're not sure that this is working. As it turned out, and I flew this one particular thing, I flew 5 Iron Hand missions in 2 days, 2 a day, and then the last day was just 1. And
In which airplane?
in the A4s.
Okay.
Yeah, but we brief. I had the Iron Hand mission, and we'd go in ahead of the strike force, and the missiles would, shoot at us as they shoot at anything, and we get into a firefight with them, which took some of the heat off the strike force, and we'd stay there until they were clear.
Okay, I'm not quite sure what you're talking about. So you had the Iron Hand, which was probably, they were using their Shrike missiles.
Yeah,
And as soon as a SAM site lights up,
we
the
were in,
pickle went off and
Yeah, we're in-
hopefully take the thing out.
we're
But
in
you
a
were
fight.
going in basically to almost a diversion sort of thing.
yeah, and we stayed there when we were ammo minus, just so we were other targets.
Well, you must have had missiles fired at you then.
Oh yeah.
So what was the procedure? What did you finally figure out what to do?
Well, first of all, you're supposed to have an escort, and if you can see it, you turn into it, and that's the best one. And the interesting thing, you fire a missile, and the maximum thrust is going to be to lift it off, and then it's going to use its flight characteristics to carry it.
So basically like about a Mach 3 type
Yeah,
missile.
what happened to me, and to several of my friends, the engine in the missile system never shut off. It was accelerating all the time. And one of the first things that we discovered was the closure rate would increase. And instead of, oh, here it comes, I can dodge it, here it is. And I know at one time specifically, I turned into one, and it's got a lethal range of flak that it fires when it goes off. And I'm sure that it closed faster than they thought it would. And I got the turbulence from the explosion going off, but didn't get a hole in the airplane because it all.
So the
was bad.
procedure is if you can see the thing go off, you aim for it, probably gas it,
Yeah.
go full speed ahead. Because I've also heard you turn away as soon as you get the thing fairly close and you make a real
Yeah,
sharp
yeah,
turn,
that's
sharp
it,
turn.
basically right. That's what they did. What happened to the last hop I flew we were there for 5 days, and I flew 7 Alpha strikes, and 5 of them were Iron Hand, and the other 2 were I was part of the main strike force. But I was making a run, and I didn't see the one that came. It came under me, and flipped. It came under me, and as I turned, and then I came back to the same heading, and the second one went under me, and it flipped me upside down
Whoa.
and backwards. And I was flying the opposite direction, upside down, from the rest of the strike force. But it didn't bang up the plane at all. And I got out of that and figured in and made my runs and got out and went home.
What was your pulse after that happened?
Oh, I don't know. Have you ever heard of the Snyder test?
No.
Snyder is, they've changed it now, but since I'm in the hospital now, I getting my blood pressure checked. And they keep checking high, low, and all this. And the one that when I ditched my Cougar years before in the water, the senior medical officer came out and took me to the hospital and everything. And the Snyder is basically the same approach that they compare the high and low of your blood pressure. So I asked him at the time, I said, hey doc, how am I doing? He said, Arnold, you're doing okay, but you couldn't pass your Snyder with the ball bat. I guess it was way off the readings. And that was a Friday afternoon, and of course I went to the club and I couldn't get drunk. Everybody was buying me drinks. And Saturday I met with the accident board, went over and everything. And Saturday night it all crashed on me. And I went to bed about 7 o'clock and I woke up 14 hours later and needed the rest.
Well, so in flying these combat missions, I mean, I see here, I'm looking at this, it's from the Military Times, and I see 4 distinguished crosses, and there's 22 October 67, 25 October 67, 26 October 67. Were those the?
Yeah, there were 5 missions, excuse me, that I flew. The first one I flew, I got a DFC for it. That got upgraded to a Silver Star, and then I got 3 other DFCs for the others.
Why would they upgrade it?
The Air Wing Commander led that one, and he thought that we had done such a superb job in preparing for it and so forth, and briefing everybody that it should be recognized. And he put us in, and I got one.
It's with all the people I've talked to, I mean, it's kind of hard to believe that we actually just, well, I can't say we lost the war, but we kind of gave it up at least.
Let me tell you the one story that I wrote an article for Hook magazine years ago called A Trip to the Suburbs, and it was when I led an Alpha strike. In fact, that was the last one I was talking about. But I think what you say is a lot of truth in it. I was the skipper of the squadron, and I had a young JO that was flying his 200th mission and going home. And he asked to fly with me in the last dawn. I said, sure. So we were flying, and we were doing this is 71. We were doing the same crap that I was doing in 67, trying to find people in the bushes, and the 2 planes going down there. Well, Billy Thomas was the name, and Billy, we taxied out and we launched 1-2, which was usually unusual. Usually your wingman is the last guy to get launched. We started down there. I'd say we were 20 minutes ahead of the rest of the flight, and we got through with the Hillsborough. He assigned us a FAC, and the FACs assigned us a assignment to bomb, and we went ahead and bombed. And we were done, and I looked at my watch, and I was about 20 minutes ahead of time, way ahead of what we thought it was going to take to get there. And I said, I called the FAC, and I said, we're ammo minus now, but I got 20 millimeter. We had the A7 at that time, and we carried, if my mind is correct, I think we carried 4 guns, and we carried a total of 2,000 rounds each. And I said, you got anything for me to strafe? And he said, no, we don't have anything. So we're ready to go home, and I looked down there. So then I went back to Hillsborough, and I said, we're 2 Alpha 7s, we're ammo minus, we got 20 millimeter. You got anybody we can work with? And they said, no, we don't have anybody. And then he says, wait a minute. He says, we got a Marine that needs some help. And I got the frequency, and I think it was Nail something or other. way down south. I called him up and he said, that's the first time, and I've told people, of all those years I was flying over there, that I ever detected any emotion in a broadcast. And this guy came on, and I think about it and I get the hair on the back of my head. I called him up, I think it was Nail 4 or 5 or something like that. And I said, Nail 4 or 5, this is, what the hell our call sign was. And I told him with 2 Alpha 7s, all we have is 20 millimeter. And he said, we need you now. And his voice was up, pitched up. And he says, we need you now, Buster, which is the term, get the hell down as fast as you can. And then he says, Fred, how you doing? And Fred comes on, and Fred is on the hill about to be overrun by these guys. And I'll skip the 4-letter words, but he says, when the fuck am I getting out of here? And Fred was, you could tell he was terrified. He was ready to, he was in deep trouble. And the guy called him up back, and the fax says, we got helos on the way to pick you up, but there'll be a few minutes. Hang in there, Fred. I got some Navy to help us out. Something like that. And he said, when am I getting the hell out of here? So then the fax says, I'm putting my smoke in, direction to, fire. Don't go to the right of the smoke. Go to the left. Fred's to the right, there's the left. And I gave Billy my 3 crews. And I made 7 runs. Bill made 7 runs. And you'd think you were watching a football game. The fact was going nuts. He says, you got them running the other way. They're running the other way. Keep it up, keep it up. Brother, all I saw was green down there. But I got back, I had 3 rounds left and Bill had 1. So we emptied 4,000 rounds down there. And on the way back, now I'm late, I know that, and they told us if something happens, you go to Da Nang and get some gas and come back on the following recovery. So I figured that's where they're going to send us. But just before I left, somebody came on, and I don't know who it was. It's the only time I ever heard it, but he said, hey, Navy, you saved us Marines down here today. I wish I thought of something sharp to say, but I couldn't. It was all in a day's work. So we started back, and I said, well, they're going to send us to Da Nang. And sure enough, they told us to keep it coming. And I still remember that day because it was a day like today, pretty clear, and we were letting down because we were late, and I was coming in, instead of at 250, I was doing about 550, just to, keep the ships stay in the wind till I get the airplanes aboard. And letting on down, and I looked back, and we hit a layer of moisture, and there were 2 great big vapor trails from us, which we never did before. But the guys on the ship said, everybody else was aboard, it was then out of the blue, comes these 2 A7s screaming by, and the 130 was downwind at the 180, and he was the last plane to come aboard, and got by, and I broke it about 500 knots, and for a while there I was afraid I was going to overrun him before I could slow down enough, to drop the gear. But everything came down, and the C-130 gets aboard and gets out of the wires, and I get aboard, and I'm moving out of the wires, and Billy gets aboard, the ship turns out of the wind. And the end of a perfect hop. It was...
you said a C-130 was landing?
Well, not 130, what is it?
C-2.
C-2, yeah, it was...
Okay, I was going to say C-130. I know they have landed C-130s on carriers.
Yeah, no, the big ones, I keep forgetting what they are.
So where did you check out in the A7?
Lemoore.
What was it like to switch to the A7 after flying the A4?
It was great. It was a Super A4. It was, looked at it, and I was pleasantly surprised at its maneuverability. It turned on a dime, and it was rugged and hang in there.
Carry more than the A4?
Did I care for it?
Did it carry more?
Yeah, I carried. It had, I think it had 8 external stores that you could hang on it.
Well, it was kind of an F8 shortened, and without AB, wasn't it kind of what it was?
I guess we were happy to get a new airplane.
Yeah.
We had several of the squadrons, I guess, got two-seaters. I don't know how much that was, but I still knew. I was at the postgraduate school, and I was still current in Monterey. And once a month, I'd drive over to Lemoore, and even though I was at the school, I was still current in the airplane. And for the weekend, they'd allow me and my buddy to fly these low-level cross countries. Just gobbled up a lot of time, and you let the guys, have the weekend off.
Could there be any more fun than that?
Yeah, we did. Well, we had we flew Saturday. We drove over Saturday morning. We fly out Saturday afternoon, and Sunday morning, and then drive back to Monterey.
You fly a low level?
Yeah,
Someplace around there?
yeah, all the time. And
Where did you fly? Where did you fly? What was that? Was there those OB?
Yeah, we usually we go up to Fallon, there's one of the fields, and drop a Mark 76 on something, and like they had a mission, and then bring it back. It's funny the way things go. We're getting ready to go on the Oriskany, and we're getting ready, and I'm leading a strike up there to Fallon, a training flight. And we get up there and we drop everybody drops on this place and rolling target. And oh shit. And sure enough, it was a target they closed, base, but there were people there. There were guards and the thing. And the Air Wing commander wasn't particularly happy with me, which I don't blame him. But it worked out. I wound up flying some good missions for him over there in the Vietnam.
So after Monterey, then you go, and then someplace a fleet replacement pilot and then you go to the Constellation.
Yeah.
Well, it says U.S. has Constellation and Enterprise. So A7 for a while, then back to the A4 again, or?
I'm trying to remember that. I don't know what they've said in there, but I was, as I said, the light attack training officer on AirPac staff. And Bob Kirksey was a friend of mine, and he had just been given the command of the Kitty Hawk. And I visited him, and I said, I'd like to be your XO. And he said, if you don't want me, you're not going to hurt my feelings, but I think I can do the job for you. And he was delighted, and called him up. The next thing I knew, I was the XO on the Kitty Hawk. And then I get this call.
So now the Kitty Hawk was 74, so this is pretty much the end of our involvement in Vietnam.
Yeah.
But wasn't the Kitty Hawk there when the Vietnam thing unwound? I can't remember exactly how it worked.
I don't know. I was in Washington then. I thought I'd be there at the normal, if there is a norm. If I did a good job as an XO, I might be selected for a deep draft.
For what?
For a deep draft. Captain of a ship.
Oh.
But it's usually a tanker or something, and you just get experience. You're an aviator, so you usually got an ops officer and an XO that are old timers as far as ship handling goes. And then if you do a good job there, you're get on the list for a possible carrier. And that's what Kirksey had done. He had a deep draft, and they gave him the Kitty Hawk. And I was there, and I got a phone call in my stateroom one time. It was a Sunday, everybody was sleeping in. And Admiral Kinnear was on, Gus Kinnear. I don't know if you know him or not. Gus is an old timer, and he's called and he's talking to the bridge. So I go up there and talk there, and he says, "You've been nominated to be the ops officer for 7th Fleet." And I said, "I have." And he said, "Yeah." They wanted to make sure that they had a ex-Air Wing commander for the job, but I convinced them that you probably had more combat experience than most of the Air Wing commanders do. And so that's what it is now. And I said, "Well, thank you, Admiral. I'll let you know." And you make choices in life, and I guess you live them. But I would have gone to Japan and had been there for God knows how long. And at the time, I was trying to convince a young lady that she should be Mrs. Arnold, not this lady. And I figured if I did that, I'd never see that lady again, which I never did, so I didn't take the orders. And instead, I get this phone call, said, we've got a spot on the joint staff for you in Washington. I said, okay, and I went there for the last 2 or 3 years. Just before I was on my retirement party, when Bob Rasmussen, I don't know if you know Bob or not, Bob is an ex-Blue Angel, and for a while there, he was the captain detailer for the Navy out of the pool that they had down there, Pensacola. And I was on my party, going away party, and he came up to me and he said, how would you like to be the CO of the drug rehab center in San Diego? And it took me about 5 seconds to say, hell no, I don't want that. So I came back and retired in '79 and got married to this lady over here in 1980.
It says here, I'm looking at this, I got this off of Wikipedia. And you can't believe how much stuff there is on Wikipedia.
Oh.
So how about that? You're famous. I mean, even the pictures, right?
Yeah.
So this says that 76 to 79, JCS, Plans and Policy, J5. What does J5 stand for?
J5, amongst them was the SAP division, Security Assistance Plans.
Well, now, this was about the same time as the
War was
Iranians took over the embassy in...
Yeah.
So, I can't remember, I know it was I think it was in late 78, early 79, wasn't it?
Yeah,
That
was the one that we got involved in. We would, there were Army, Navy, and Air Force represented on this SAP division.
SAP stands for?
Yeah, Security Assistance Plans.
Okay.
And the Air Force wanted to sell the I-Chaparral, which is the anti-tank missile,
Right.
and to the South Vietnamese. And we looked at it, and I looked at it, and I said, Jesus, that...
South Koreans.
South Koreans, what is he?
You said South Vietnamese.
South Koreans, pardon me. Anyway, I looked at, they needed helmets and boots and things like that. And we knew that 30 minutes after they got the first I-Chaparral, it'd be in the back of a Volkswagen going north. So I said, hell, they need something. But it would have cut the cost down for the Air Force. And and I said, you haven't convinced me that they should have it. And so forth. And my boss went along with it. And interesting thing, you may know that Wednesday is uniform day. Monday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays and Fridays, civilian uniform, yeah. And they had 2 generals come out to give us a briefing, and I was invited. So I show up in my Navy uniform, while everybody else is in greens, and I think, what's going on here? And we got this briefing about, selling this thing, why it should be done. And I left there, and I remember walking out, and one of the friends of mine was a GS-16 there, and one of his units, and he complimented me. He says, Bob, you asked some good questions there that needed to be addressed. And I said, thanks, Frank. And I went there, and I got back to my office, and there was a 1-star general that was put in there for a while. And he called me into the office, and he said, the general wants to see you up in the front office. He says, I heard that you went to that meeting and you fell asleep, and then you asked some stupid questions. And I said, what? And he says, don't tell me, go say the general. And about that time, I was ready to tell him to take this whole joint staff and jam it. We went up there, and the general, he was a sharp guy, and I walked in, and I guess I didn't hide my displeasure. And he says, calm down, Bob. He said, why do you think I sent you? He says, because you can't make a decision. You're not allowed to. He said, they wanted me in there, but I figured, you could handle it. He said, I heard you did a good job with it, so don't worry about it. And it was all done. But I got a taste of the politics that go into this thing, and I figured, hell, I'm never going to get in an airplane again, or if I did, then everybody would be, this guy fly anymore. And it was over with, so I decided to try something else.
I'm kind of curious. I mean, was the Navy involved in that? Because when they tried the rescue effort in the desert, when they were going to go into to rescue those embassy people,
Yeah,
was that was in the '79, wasn't it?
I think you're right. I'm pretty sure. I wasn't
You guys weren't involved with that.
involved with that, no.
So you
The one I was going to tell you about that you might get a kick out of, we were kicking around the other day, what's the best hop you've ever had? And I kept thinking, well, one of the combat hops and so on. And the one I came up with was flying that damn Beechcraft. And we had it for instrument training. You get an instructor and you have two students. One would be working, the other one would be a lookout. And the Beechcraft, the old SNB, was what we used.
Was that the tail dragger?
Yeah, and it was such a tough airplane to land smoothly.
Did everything at 90 knots?
Yeah, everything.
I flew it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I got checked out in it, and I take the airplane from Jacksonville, main base, up to the bounce field, where they parked the carriers. And I did this for one squadron.
What year would this be?
This it had to be, oh gosh, let me see. Well, it had to be mid-70s, late, maybe earlier 70s. But I got checked out in the thing. Then I went up there one day with bounced this squadron and was ready to go back from Mayport to Jacksonville. And I get a call from the ship, and the ship says, I've got 3 commanders that need to get over to main side for a meeting. Can you drop them off? I said, sure, we've got plenty of room. So they could climb in the airplane, and I'm a lieutenant, and I taxi on out and getting ready to roll, and I look back and I got 6 eyeballs looking at me. Who is this kid? What is he doing? And I thought to myself, God, I better not bounce this thing when I land it. And I made the sweetest landing. I kept telling everybody, it should have been made in a movie. It just went tweet, tweet, and just rolled out. And in fact, when we got to the parking place, one of the guys, commander, says, nice landing, Lieutenant. I figured that was worth it. And it's still one of the highlights of my whole career.
Well, that must have been I think we're thinking of a different airplane. I'm thinking of what they call the Bamboo Bomber, which was a twin recip tail dragger, non-steerable tail wheel, not much in the way of brakes at all.
It was used for instrument training, and just as the SNB.
SNB.
We used to call it the Super Navy Bomber. It was just a.
I can look it up. I'll figure out what it is. I'll put pictures of it in the video.
Yeah.
So I see that one of this. So you've got Alpha Strike Leader and Haiphong ammunition storage area, and then 3 Iron Hand strikes on Fujian Airfield. So when you attacked the airfield, what was on the airfield?
Airplanes.
Really? What kind of airplanes?
MiGs.
And you were bombing and strafing them, or just...
Yeah, bombing and strafing mostly. We go after the. We didn't go after the. We didn't see that many lined up, but they had buildings, hangars.
I didn't think that we did. I thought that's something we didn't do very much of, is attack the airfields.
Yeah, well, I don't know how much that we did. I have one of those citations was Bob Rademacher was telling you about, ex-Blue Angel. He was my escort, and we came off the target, and I still had 2 bombs left, and we're all going home. And it was kind of a scattered to mixed cloudy. And I went over this, looked down there, and there's this field down there, outlying field, and there's a MiG on it, ready to take off. And I told Bob I'm going down there, and I had 2 bombs, and I got 2 hits on it, and took the MiG out, and he wrote me up for one of those DFCs, I think.
That weirdly would take out a MiG, wouldn't it, a 500-pound
Oh,
bomb?
yeah.
Ruined that guy's whole day.
I would think so. I'm gonna sneak up and catch one of these guys on the way home.
So you never actually, you saw only 3 MiGs in flight, though.
3 MiGs, I think, is all I ever saw in flight.
It's really odd, isn't it?
Yeah, we expected the heavy, well, the fighters were looking for it, of course, heavy involvement. But I guess the decision was made that we're moving into this area, let's do a missile system instead of the air defense system.
What have you done since you retired in '79?
I got my master's and my doctorate in this field of leadership and human behavior, and I worked with a company and another fellow in Coronado, and we did management training for a lot of the Navy. We did a lot of Navy, but we did also civilians too. In fact, I taught for a few years for the University of Redlands, and they have a extensive program here in California.
Well, let's see. Let me just. So your 2 main airplanes, the fighter airplanes, the A4
In the A7.
and the A7, and your F8 experience in the F4,
Just a FAM hop.
real short. Okay.
Yeah.
Which one do you like better between the A4 and the A7?
Oh, it's different missions. I have to.
How were the missions different? I thought they were kind of the same thing, air to ground, close air support. Sort of.
Well, they made that the F8, but the F8's a. It's
No,
a
the
fun-
no, the A7 and the
Oh.
A4.
Oh, the A7 and A4. I liked the A7. It was more reliable as far as being sturdy and being able to take hits, and it was just it wasn't. You might think it was a clumsy airplane because it's bigger,
Right.
and but it compared favorably to the A4, and I liked it for the fact that it had 20 millimeter plus you carried a bigger bomb load.
Yeah, I just remember. It seems like it wasn't in service very long.
Well, the war, stopped. I mean,
Yeah.
it was an improvement over what we had.
And the Air Force had them, and the Navy had them.
Yeah. Exchange pilot, Air Force, with us, Sam Holmes, and I was just talking about him the other night, and Sam was we get into the Philippines after a line period, and they built us a cat house there. I don't know if you've spent much time in the Philippines at all, but they built the cat house just because we were using the O Club for wild parties, and they decided, let's get these guys out of the mainstream. And they had a section where you walk in the club and you step down maybe 5 or 6 steps into a nice dining area. And what we would do is we would put a guy in a chair like this with wheels on it, put a tablecloth around the back, and one guy, and we'd run him and we'd catapult him off into this space, and he would land and catch a wire. That was the arrested landings, and they started doing that. And Sam comes up and he said, he says, I'm going to try a night landing. I said, what do you mean? He says,
Oh, jeez.
so we put a napkin over his eyes.
There was no alcohol involved in this.
No, not at all. he hit the ramp. And he said to me afterwards, he says, I think I dropped my nose at the ramp. I said, I think you did. Oh, man. Sam was good. It was called the, what the hell was it called? It got so that we rendezvous at they built one just for that. It was a little safer and all that, but we could come in in your old clothes and you didn't have to get dressed and all that kind of stuff. But they were pretty good about
There was a thing like that before I went into service. We're talking, I was in college, 63, 64, and I was reading like a True magazine, or Argosy, or one of those magazines. And it talked about these crazy pilots down at Willis Air Base in North Africa, in Libya. and how the guys would line up a bunch of tables, get all drunk, of course, and then
Yeah.
run and try and jump and slide across the table and catch the end of the table with your feet. It's sort of a Air Force version for Carrie Rennie. And I remember that. And anyway, so like 2 years later in Europe, and we went down to Libya, and sure enough, that's exactly what these idiots were doing. That was a crazy place. There'd be about 100 pilots, and no women.
Yeah, yeah,
And, we used to see the Libyan Air Force. This was great. I'm sure you've never heard this before. The Libyan Air Force, they flew T-33s, and we had a huge bar. It was a World War II base. It was a huge bar, and the Libyan pilots always sort of stay at one end. I'm sure old Muammar Gaddafi was one of those guys. It was just about the time he came to power. But we would see the Libyan Air Force take off in the T-birds. Take off, landing gear down, fly around the pattern a couple times, land. They never left the pattern and never raised the gear. That was the Libyan Air Force.
Oh my God.
So whenever time you hear about the vaunted Libyan Air Force, attacking people, I'd go, yeah, right, this is going to be good. So,
Yeah.
let me ask you this: what was the weirdest thing that ever happened to you flying an airplane?
Oh, well, I hadn't thought about that.
That's why I asked you.
I know, that's a good one. I'll make contemplate that and I'll get back to you, but nothing jumps out right away.
People usually have one favorite story they tell
Yeah,
after a few beers. Anything you got?
I have to think about that. I used to take,
Flares. Flares.
where?
The flares.
Flares.
The Flair story.
The flare story.
Oh, with the, yeah, that's probably the one. Billy Thomas.
No. Roger Duder. The flares.
Oh, Roger, yeah, Roger.
Bob, hang on. I want you to hold on to the book here, but
Okay,
keep your hands down.
okay.
Sorry about that.
Roger was one of us, my women. Very bright guy, probably the world's worst pilot, but he had so much drive that he wanted to be good. You couldn't give up on him. And the guys came to me, I was as the ops officer. He was flying the exec's wing, and the exec had always had a problem with Roger. And he'd come back after a flight and he'd chew him out in front of the rest of the crew and all that. And I saw that, and I went to the skipper, and we had a great skipper, I thought, Doug Mao. And I said to the skipper, I think we got some personality problems here, and I'd like to take Roger as my wingman and give the XO somebody that's going to, make him fly right. And the skipper said, oh, Bob, these boys have to grow up. Then the next day he came to me and he said, you're right, let's make the change. Well, I found out months later that Roger had taken his wings. He says, I'm not going to fly if I have to fly with this guy anymore. So the skipper went ahead, and Roger was delighted, and we flew a couple of day hops, and then we went out at night. And somebody was asking me that the other night. I enjoyed flying, obviously I wouldn't have been doing it, but there was no joy in night flying off a carrier. It was total work. The cat shot and the rest of the landing, I mean, you better be on your toes because it's unforgiving. And anyway, we went out at night and we caught a convoy of trucks, and we were calling all the other planes to come in and bomb them. And we had flares, and what we would come over them, they were stopped. We dropped the flares, and then we, fly in over the flares, and the target was lit, and we dropped our bombs. Well, Roger gets on the phone, on the radio, and says, I'm out of bombs, but I still have some flares left. And I'm about to roll in. I said, well, okay, we'll get rid of your flares, meaning we're not going to take them back to the ship. The Oriskany had that real bad fire, and it was caused because somebody had ignited a flare by accident and threw it into a flare locker.
Oh, geez.
And I think it killed 34 people.
Yeah, right.
It was a real bad one. But anyway, they wouldn't take you back aboard. If you didn't drop your flares, or they send you to the beach with them. So anyway, that's what I meant. Well, Roger thought it meant something else. and I'm in my run, and all of a sudden the flares go up above me. And I am, they've been shooting the last 30 minutes at sound, and they said, oh, look at what we've got. And everybody opened up on me. And I was doing, I don't know what the hell I was doing, trying to dodge it, but I was ready to kill Roger and get back to the ready room. And we always debrief, what did the LSO say about your landing? And the LSO gave Roger an OK 3-wire. I mean, for him to get an OK 3 in the daytime was magic. And here he got one at night. And I said, Roger, that's great. He says, good work. I say, about tonight's hop, Roger, don't do that to me again. And he said, okay. And then we never said another word about it.
Yeah, I remember those flares. We did that, not a lot, but I didn't like flying at night, but watching those
Yeah.
spent flare canisters go flying by the canopy, when you're doing 400 knots, it's just like, this is ridiculous. Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Well, anyway,
Did you get what you were looking for, I hope?
sure. Yeah.
Good.
Well, it's just good stuff. I mean, somebody's got to tell these stories.
Yeah.
Well, as a dedicated fighter pilot with 300 missions, I mean, were you happy to not have to go back to it again, or?
Yeah, in a way I was, because I saw, as a skipper of a squadron, I was doing the same stuff I was doing 5 years before. And, trying to choke them off. And we knew that we had the air superiority, and we could go in there and do some damage. I don't know what political shenanigans went on to call that war off.
Didn't concern yourself with it, I guess.
Well, the interesting thing about that is I got into the management consulting and went through a lot of stuff there that, and I've got to believe that the Air Force is the same. You get orders to a squadron, and you're preset for the next year about what you're going to be doing in order to get that combat ready. And I use I had 6 good serving men. They served me well and true. The names were what, why, how, where, when, and who. And it's a good one to ask, And I say, I use that, and I say, okay, what it is you're trying to accomplish and why? Well, I'm trying to establish air superiority over a landing area so that we can get our troops. That's your specific, your objective, your strategic objective. And the next step is, what are you going to do to prepare for that? What are your tactics? Well, that's where you get into all your exercises and practice bombing and practice that. And then the third one was the who. Well, that's the what, where, and when, or the where and when. And the other one was the who have you got as your leaders. And that's where I got it different. I say, you got to start picking your leaders right from the beginning, so that they're supporting what you want to accomplish as far as the small groups, train to get ready to go. And if you can answer those questions, you've probably done a job. But you don't have any other time. I mean, it's full. You fill one thing and you go move to the next, and you're on the schedule to be ready to go aboard ship on such and such a date and deploy, and you better be ready. And that's the way it works. Now, what the Navy has done, they've gotten into this. I've been following for years, but they've gotten into this. We conduct leadership training, usually for the senior officers, and we don't have any way of making sure that any leadership training is being done at any other level for your enlisted men and your different officer ranks. You should be developing your the leadership of PIPs. And the Navy just came out with it's called the Addendum for Leadership Development, and they've got it all written out. It's a beautiful proposal, But what they don't have is a way of doing it. In the first place, they don't have the time because they want the instruction to be conducted by people in uniform. And the second one is they don't have the people who know how to do that. So there's two strikes against it. And for years, it's been the frustration that the senior people will get all this wonderful incentives and motivation. How do you get it down to the troops? And what can you do? Well, they started, they got enough gripes that they developed a couple of workshops up around Fallon. And there's a selection committee before a person is chosen to be a commanding officer. And before they're given the job, they have to attend these classes. And they say they're great classes, but there's a frustration because these fellas get it and they know it already, and then they get into a squadron and I don't have anybody to teach it or support it or what have you. And we're starting to get, my partner and I that I work with, a retired Navy guy, and we got an instrument now where we talk about behaviors, and if you and I were working together, we'd have information about each other, and you'd know how to deal with me, and I know how to deal with you. You know, you like to challenge, or you like to support, or what happens, but it works, and we're just starting to get an interest from them. But the problem that they have is there's no time in there. You know, it's we got to go to Fallon next week. We don't have time to, you know. And I get this in the comments from some of the workshops. The CEOs, I don't have time for this. I'm not here to preach. I'm here to teach them how to fly and so forth. So they've got some good arguments about it, and that's where we are. My buddy and I trying to break through that. I get a lot of people say, "Boy, that's good stuff you got."
I think we start one.
Oh, well, I mean, you know, the things that you've done, the places you've gone, you know,
He has had.
compared to most
hard
people,
life.
you know, you've done amazing things.
Yeah,
And that is one thing about aviation, isn't it? You know,
yeah.